Hi everyone, and welcome to the Super Feeler podcast. My name is Laurie, and I'm joined by Shanthi and Dave today. We're going to be continuing to read through the Dialectical Behavior Therapy Skills for Life book by Diana Partington. If you haven't picked up this book yet, you'll hear why we like it so much as we talk through this conversation. And we've also done we're on chapter 6 now. So this is our 6th episode of this series, so highly encourage you to check it out. Should note that we're not counselors. We're just people who have done dialectical behavior therapy as clients before and have really been impacted by it in a positive way. And so it's just us kind of reflecting on what this looks like for us. So we're now officially on Unit 2, which is interpersonal effectiveness. So for those of you who are starting on this episode, dialectical behavior therapy is broken up into 4 different kind of units. So emotion regulation is first. Now we're doing interpersonal effectiveness. I think next is emotion regulation. Is that right?
Mindfulness is first.
Did I not? I literally don't remember what I said.
I think you said emotional regulation.
Oh my God. Thank you, Shanthi. I swear my brain is like a complete disaster right now. I don't know what is going on. I can't remember names of very good friends at the moment. It's kind of horrifying. Okay.
Do you need to rest? Is that
I don't know. I'm going through med changes. And I think that they're just kind of short wiring my brain a little bit, or short circuiting my brain. Okay, so yeah, thank you, Shanthi. Unit 1 is mindfulness. Unit 2 is interpersonal effectiveness. Unit 3 is emotion regulation, and Unit 4 is distress tolerance. So the first 5 episodes that we went through, which you can find on the feed, are the mindfulness skills, and now we're moving on to interpersonal effectiveness, which I think might be my favorite group of skills. Or one of them. Maybe this is an interpersonal effectiveness. Or, oh my God, see? My brain. This and just emotion regulation. It's horrifying.
The therapist read me this week, and she was like, it looks like you're stuck in the 4th one, the distress tolerance. Maybe you need to live a life worth living.
You're rude.
I was like, don't do this to me.
Don't use my own languages against me. This is not what I want. I love it. That's so funny. That's a good sign that you have a good relationship with your clinician, though, right? To just have them shade you slightly. That's awesome. So do we want to talk a little bit about what the interpersonal effectiveness skills are really generally for all of us first? Well, I can say Diana says these skills are about being effective in your relationships. But then she also validates that sometimes no matter how skillful you are, you're not always going to get what you want. And so I think that that's important for us to recognize, is that this is not a code to be able to get exactly what you want. I remember I was at a roulette table once because I love roulette. And this girl came up to me, or she was sitting next to me. She's like, I figured it out. And I was like, no. I was like, no, you didn't. I'm really sorry. You didn't. So that's kind of how I feel about this, is you can improve your interpersonal effectiveness and you might think you figured out how to get what you want, but there's always going to be a little bit of variability there, and the stats aren't always on your side. Oh, that was so funny.
I think one thing, and I really appreciated about this book, because it was something that the way they do it, and it gets into sort of getting a little bit into chapter 6, but it took me a long time to realize how important this idea that in the interpersonal relations, I think that when I first started doing DBT and the first round I did, it's so easy to focus on what do I want out of this, what is it that I want? And obviously, Dear Man is sort of it's often presented that way. I want something out of my boss. I want something out of my partner. I want something out of a family member, and that sort of thing. And I think that really didn't click until, I'd sort of realized that there's 2 other equal things that are sort of like a triangle, right? It's not just what do I want, but equally important is how do I want this, how do I want this person to feel about me? Or what's the, it's balancing the values. What do I want? What do I want this relationship to look like? And how important is it to me? And then also, how do I want to feel about myself? When I've either said I want something or said no to something, and that none of those necessarily always takes priority. It's really a case by case thing. And so I think she does a big favor to people reading this book, because even going through 2 rounds of DBT, it really took me almost a second round to the second one to focus on the other two, the importance. Sometimes the most important thing is the relationship overall. And sometimes the most important thing is how I feel about myself when the interaction's done.
Yeah, and that self-validation piece, I think because a lot of the time when you're first taking dialectical behavior therapy, you're like, I just need to function, right? This is not about well, I hope I feel good about myself at the end of this. It's like, no, I need to survive and I need to be able to communicate my basic needs to the people who are around me. And I really didn't feel like I got to that point either, Dave, around how do I feel about this situation? Am I validating myself and others throughout these interpersonal effectiveness skills? I only really got to that, I think it was a Super Feelers Club session actually, where we were doing a Dear Man for someone. And I was like, what is the man again? And interestingly, I don't actually think it is in this book, but it's all about, or no, it wasn't that. It was the fast skill. Oh my gosh, what's the fast skill? Is that in here?
Which is the self-respect one, right?
Yeah, it is. I just can't remember what the acronym is. Marsha loves a good acronym.
I think while you're looking for that, I think that to me, it's particularly hard for me, and I'm not trying to speak for everybody with BPD, but my sense from having heard a lot of people speak and interacted with a lot of people is that I don't think I'm the only one who, when it comes to relationship, before I started DBT, we asked how do I want the other person to feel about me when it's over? I need them to love me.
Right.
Period. That's in every interaction, that's what I need. And self-respect, I don't want to feel about myself when it's over, irrelevant. My feelings, how I feel about myself, as long as this other person comes out treating me like they love me, and they're not rejecting me, how I feel about myself couldn't matter less. And so it made it hard to think about those two things.
That is such a BPD experience. I really appreciate you saying that so clearly. I think we've all been there. I was wrong. It's not fact skill. It's fast skill, FAST. But I still don't think that it's actually in this book, which is kind of interesting. But it's be fair. Again, Marsha loves acronyms, but the way that she loves acronyms is kind of hilarious because they're very far stretches to how they actually should be. So be fair, no apologies, stick to values, and be truthful. And I think even though fast isn't necessarily identified in the chapters of this book, I don't think, it comes across in a lot of these other areas. So we can definitely talk through that. How do you feel about interpersonal effectiveness overall, Shanthi?
I think doing DBT, this was the hardest to digest because I would just be yeah, we can try all we want, but they're totally ridiculous and they won't listen to us anyway. And so I don't know, it was hard to digest, but I'm excited to go through this book and see if my opinion has changed.
Yeah, I think that'll be an awesome experience to go through because it's been quite a long time. When did you do DBT again?
A bunch of times. I think the last time was, let me think.
They all blend together.
Yeah, I can't even remember. Maybe 10 years ago.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So a lot has changed in 10 years, right? And so it'll be super interesting to hear at the end if you're actually, the interpersonal effectiveness skills were the easiest now, or nope, they still remain hard, because I think we all have different experiences with that. So chapter 6 is about clarifying priorities, figuring out what matters most. What do I want from an interaction? How does how do I want the other person to feel about me? How do I want to feel about myself? And I really appreciate, I don't know if this is the same order as regular DBT because it's been such a long time since I've taken it, but I really like that we're starting with what do I want or what do I need? Because it's really hard when you're trying to do some of these other interpersonal skills that's the hardest part to figure out. And that's how I use these skills, is to try and actually do some brain mapping of, I'm really mad at this person and I hate them and I want them to change. Okay, but how do you want them to change? I don't know. I just hate them. They just need to change. And that doesn't get us anywhere. So to be able to clarify our priorities is such a good skill to start with in this unit. Are you our story summarizer?
I'm happy to. I feel bad. I don't want to, steal anybody's thunder if they really want to. They're dying to summarize this one. This was my least favorite.
I do have a lot of thoughts on this one, actually, but I don't want to summarize it.
I did not like this story. This was my least favorite story. And maybe and again, it's been a little bit since I remember it, but maybe the lesson is that, like, it's about, being there for the situation you're in and not the situation that you wish you were in. I think the general idea is that there's a woman who, she's working at a hospital, and she meets a doctor who, it's fair to say, is like kind of annoying. Like, she doesn't really like him. A lot of things that rub her the wrong way, but he's also sort of like after her in a romantic sense. And he just like keeps trying and trying and trying. I think one night they're like having drinks, and she says, "Okay, I guess, why not?" And so they start making out, and they wind up getting married.
Yeah, they've been like going out to like dinner as colleagues for, I don't know how long it was, like 6 months or something, right?
Yeah, or how about this? Like, not married. I guess they're getting. She wants them to get engaged. Or,
no, he's like out of nowhere. They're at they've never touched each other. They've never like discussed a relationship. They've never done anything, and then they just go out for dinner on these like what she thinks are like work related things, or like she's not really sure what they are. And then he goes like, after 6 months at dinner, "Hey, will you marry me?" And she's like, "The fuck?" Like, oh, and then she says yes, which is like,
yeah,
this is where the story gets a little bit like, I don't really think that was the right call.
I think she says it's not going to get better than this, so might as well.
Yeah.
Like, literally like that.
I think you're right. I think, which is really sad, and nobody get engaged to someone that treats them like shit, please, because that's not good.
Yeah, she's doing a pros and cons, like, well, the sex isn't great, but it's warm and friendly, so, I guess we should get each other with flowers.
And that's after she says yes to getting engaged, isn't it? Like, she's like doing this pros and cons list retroactively, because they hadn't even like kissed until he asks her to marry him, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, right. And the sort of exclamation point, and maybe this is part that like because a little, that whole part just sort of threw me off, I think, of how we got there. But the point is, so they go to the Eiffel Tower in Paris on their before their wedding for a trip, and she's just like, it's really, really, really important to her that they kiss when they get up on the Eiffel Tower, right? And he's like
basically
photographs.
Completely ignoring her. He's like an amateur photographer, I think, and so she's like told him about how this is like so important to me. This is like my number one goal in life, which like also red flag. My number one goal in life is to be like kissed on the Eiffel Tower. I think these people are 50 or something. Like she's 53. Like, this is a weird life goal, but okay. No judgment, I suppose. I'm judging really hard. And so he knows that this is her life goal. But they get up to the Eiffel Tower, and he's like, "Oh, I gotta like take this picture. I gotta take this picture. I gotta take this picture." And she's getting like progressively like more angry, because they're not pictures of her. They're not pictures of them. They're just like photos of the Eiffel Tower, which you can Google. And then she's getting really angry. Then at the very end, they kiss, and then the story ends.
But isn't the idea that she sort of realizes that like she can be angry, she can fight him about it, but he's going to keep taking photographs, and so she just sort of like, she uses skills and not freak out. And yeah, I don't know. I think that's why I have a difficulty with it, because in the end, she never really, or maybe it does say that. I guess at the end, so he's finished taking photographs, and the light is down, and then they have their romantic kiss. And I guess to me, maybe now that I think about it, maybe the reason I don't like this story is because maybe it's particularly close to home, in the sense that like, have I like wound up in situations that like other people would be like, why the hell, like, what an impulsive decision to like agree to this or agree to that, or like, to like go along with it. You're like, you seem so unhappy with how things are going. Like, why did you get yourself into this situation? And then, and then, and I don't know if it's like necessarily in those situations, but also like I definitely have been in a lot of situations where like I'll get fixated on like this doing this specific thing is extremely important to me. And like, it could be somewhere like, if you have, like an Eiffel Tower in importance to me, where it's like, I've been planning this thing. It's so important to me that this happen. And then life takes a different course and other things are happening. Other people have other desires. I just lose my mind. Like, it's just, I cannot control my emotions and I wind up ruining the experience, not only for me, but for the other people. And like the whole thing's a disaster. And I guess the lesson here is that, again, not that not the experience is going to be exactly how I want, or maybe I shouldn't have even been in the situation in the first place if I had been less impulsive. But once I'm there, there are ways to not sort of like ruin it and come out feeling better about myself, I guess. So that's my take on it. I don't know.
I think she says at one point, like, he should have remembered that this was my big goal. And then she's resentful about that. She's resentful. Then she finally speaks up and says, hey, remember this? Like, remember the big kiss I wanted? And then he's like, 10 more minutes, the sun is setting. And then finally she gets what she wanted. But I think like one of the points of this story is that saying like, oh, we could sit there and be resentful that we're not getting what we want, or we can speak up and say like, hey, remember, this is very important.
And then get rejected anyways, basically, right? Like, the sun is setting, like, yeah, that'd be a really cute time to kiss me, actually. Right? I know what you mean, Dave, around we've been in similar situations. And same with Shanthi, like, I think you're right that like communicating your priorities, people can't read your mind, blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, the story kind of comes across, well, if you're kind of middle-aged and single, you may as well take the best thing that you can get because that's all you're going to get. And eventually he's going to kiss you, even though you've communicated your priorities. So like, I guess it's fine. And I just like don't love that lesson, even if it's an unintended lesson that has nothing to do with DBT.
It's not pretty.
No. And maybe it's realistic though.
And maybe in some ways this is coming at it a little bit from a therapist perspective, where like I would imagine you get presented with clients who are there with the wrong guy.
Mm-hmm.
But like you can't just sort of like tackle that every week or every time there's something that's bothering them. Like at some point they've accepted that this is who they want to be with. And it's not your job, I would think, to like try to talk them out of it at every session. But I guess you can sort of like steer them towards using skills to make their life as enjoyable and, as happy as possible. Is that, I don't know, I'm trying to put a silver lining on.
Yeah, her books or her stories do come from clients. A lot of the time, I mean, obviously, like they've been modified for confidentiality reasons. They do come from clients. And ironically, my situation with my favorite person recently is actually very similar to this story, up until he asks me to marry him at dinner and I say yes and then get really angry about not kissing on the Eiffel Tower. But everything up to that, I was like, oh my God, this is my entire life. This is my entire life. And then obviously things got slightly different. But yeah, it's just it's not the best version of the story. Let's just say that. But we've already talked about it for 20 minutes. So obviously it's stimulating conversation. So that's good, I guess. Okay, let's get into the skill. So the skill is about clarifying priorities. I wouldn't say that this is a skill that's in my toolbox in the sense that I consciously think I need to clarify my priorities. I think I use it more as like a dear man step rather than a standalone skill. But I don't think there's anything wrong with it being a standalone skill. I just haven't used it like that. So like Dave talked about earlier, it says there's 3 questions to be mindful about your priorities. Objective, what do I want from this interaction? Relationship, how do I want the other person to feel about me when this is over? And self-respect, how do I want to feel about myself when this is over? I think those are great priorities, and you could just do those about specific situations if you wanted to without having all of the other skills involved. Do you guys use this skill in that way on a regular basis intentionally?
I think it goes back to like surviving a situation for me, like thinking about like, okay, I'm really uncomfortable right now, but I need this other person to get along with me. I guess this is what my therapist was saying about distress. But I need this other person to get along with me, and like, okay, I guess the hard part in this is like the self-respect. Like, how do you determine what is respectful for you?
Yeah, I think, I mean, not to repeat the stuff I said before. Yeah, I mean, I think that thinking about it, for me, thinking about it in terms of values and boundaries, and not so much like, do I love myself or hate myself after the interaction, but more like, just like, it's okay for me to say no to things. It's okay for me to like have certain values, particularly around like, it's okay for me to not be okay with getting treated in a certain way by this person. It's okay. I mean, not that I have to like freak out on them, but just like, it's okay for me to not be okay with it. And sort of the same thing with the sort of what do I want, which is also something that I think people, or at least I think part of BPD tend to devalue. And so it's like, it's just reminding myself it's okay for me to want things, you know? So I think to me, that's what's most useful. It's just reminding myself that it's okay for me to even be considering those two parts of the triangle.
Yeah, and we deserve to have those parts as well, even though for many of us, we've been kind of told, like, you're the problem. You cause all of these issues. You don't deserve the good things because of what you've done, whatever, how you are. And that's not true. They deserve them just as much as I deserve them, even if I wish that wasn't the case. Or I think a lot of the time we don't feel like we deserve that respect or self-respect because we've been so like looked down on by our families, by our providers, by sometimes our friends, and then by society. Like if you think about the stigma around borderline, that eats into every component of your life, including how you feel about yourself. And if you feel like you're a bad person because you're being told that you're a bad person, bad people, quote unquote, don't deserve good things or don't deserve to get what they want or need, which is obviously not true. So let's look at they actually have a nice, on page 109, they have a nice little like diagram of clarifying priorities and interpersonal reactions. I'm going to try and get that so I can share it on the screen. So it's a little bit easier, but it's just those 3 questions and a bit of a graphic, which is nice. So what specific things do I want from this interaction? She talks about how some people put so much energy into taking care of random strangers that they exhaust themselves. I think we've all done that. We're such compassionate, empathetic people that we often, again, I don't want to speak for everyone, but I can speak for me and 100 other people I've talked to. We spend so much of our time being like people pleasers and like just trying to make people like us despite who we are or what our behaviors are like. And that eats into you a lot. And I've said this, I'm sure, before in episodes around this, but I think that DBT in some ways made me more passive because I just was like, yeah, it's okay. Like, that's fine, whatever. As opposed to like, no, that's actually not okay. Which I think when I was a bit like feistier, believe it or not, I was feistier than I am now, that I wouldn't let people do that, but I just wouldn't do it effectively. And that's the difference. So then how do I want the other person to feel about me when this conversation is over? So I think that's really important. In long-term relationships, treat your relationship as the priority is more important than your specific objective and self-respect until your wise mind says that it isn't, right? So obviously, sometimes everybody gets angry at their spouse or their partner or their brother or their sister or whatever, their boss. But at the end of the day, I still have to see this person for the next however many years. And I don't want to lose my job, or I don't want to lose my relationship, or I don't want to lose my house. And so I need to put that priority over another. But at the same time, if you're let's use the work example. If you're being treated like horribly and you get home every day and you cry and you have the Sunday scaries where you can't think about going to work the next day because it's so anxiety producing, well, then maybe the long-term goal isn't staying at work because work is hurting you more than it's giving you the benefit. And so then those priorities can shift to the self-respect one where you're like, I deserve to be well and I deserve to be treated like a good person. So now my priority has shifted. That's how I would look at it.
I mean, I would say also, I mean, I think that each of these comes with like an and. Like it's not, I don't see this as like you have to pick one and the other ones fall away. So like, on the one hand, you could be saying, I want to be treated, like my goal is I want to be treated better at work. I feel like I'm being mistreated and not appreciated. And you could have a boss where, if you walk into their room and say, you stupid bitch, like, you guys do this job of treating me terrible and I hope I never see you again. Like, it has nothing to do with like getting what you want, which is better treatment, but it will ruin your relationship with an actual flesh and blood human being. And so, I think it has helped me to separate out those two things as well.
That's a great example. And at the end of that interaction, will you have self-respect? No. You're going to beat yourself up over that interaction for like 6 months. So you're not getting either of the things that you think that you want or that you think you're getting because you're being impulsive about it, even if it feels really good in the moment. I love in the moment to like call people a bitch, but it doesn't get me anywhere.
And it makes me feel terrible afterwards for a long time. For way longer than they feel bad, I'm sure. They've forgotten it
100%.
long before I start feeling better.
100%. This is keeping you up at night for years. Or you have, I don't know if anybody, maybe this is just me, but I will often, so I have an issue with sleeping because I ruminate a lot, right? And I ruminate about the thing I said or the thing I should have said or how I'm a terrible person. And then sometimes I will ruminate about how I know that I'm supposed to feel guilty about something, but I actually don't remember what I'm supposed to feel guilty about. But then I'm like, oh, that's even more scary because I know that I did something wrong. And it's like, but you don't even know what you did wrong. And then that's even more scary. It's such a bizarre, my brain, I don't love it most of the time. So the self-respect piece, it says, at times your wise mind will decide that the relationship is not as important as your self-respect. And when your deeply held values, safety and well-being are at jeopardy, self-respect needs to be the priority. One thing that I thought was really interesting was about close to the bottom of that page on 111. It says, in DBT groups, people who focus on self-respect as their default priority tend to struggle to take care of relationships. They also fail to focus on their objective. Instead, they often get stuck on making a point or a lesson. They may lecture the other person about their inadequate morals or explain what the other person should be doing, and therefore they end up damaging their relationships and rarely get what they want. So they're kind of getting none of the things that they think that they're trying to get. And the self-respect one is like kind of easy to be like righteous and be like, well, I deserve XYZ. But the dialectic in that is, so does the other person. We both deserve self-respect. And so how can we work together on that? So I just thought that was a really interesting paragraph. And I've definitely seen that before.
And also, look, if I have like a really low bar for feeling like my self-respect boundaries are being violated and I'm freaking out on my partner like all the time, if they have any self-respect, they'll get out of it.
Totally. Yeah. Because they don't deserve to be treated badly either. And there's only so much you can take, right? Like the goal is to maintain the relationship, but if it's going to kill you, don't do it. But don't make that decision quickly, right? Like those are the kind of impulsive decisions where you could be like, fuck you, I'm out. But that's probably not the most effective way of doing that, nor is it actually considering your priorities. It's just the like immediate impulsive decision. But I think like over time, if you can really consider that, then that's okay. And I honestly, the people that they're talking about here, where they say that they are like hyper focused on self-respect and can't consider others or to maintain relationships, I feel really sad for them because there's so much more to life than just telling other people they're wrong. And so I hope that, not to say that any of those people like that's my decision to make for anyone, but using this clarifying priorities skill could be so beneficial if you feel like you're in that place where for some reason you're always right and the other person is always wrong. And but at the end of the like you think that you're getting self-respect in the moment, but then afterwards you're not sure. I think this skill is a really important one for people.
Well, or also, I mean, I think the idea too is like someone who's totally focused on self-respect in an unhealthy way, they're constantly going to be feeling hurt by the other person. They're constantly, it's this idea where they say the other person should be doing something. And I'm going to take it as a personal affront that like they're not doing things the way that they should be doing. That seems like a recipe for the end of a relationship.
Yeah, not tying in the assume good intentions, right? It's assume that you're trying to hurt me.
Other people have ideas of how they want to do things. And if I've decided that when people would do things differently than how I think they should, that it's a violation of my boundaries or my self-respect, like you're going to have a hard time being in a relationship with another real human being.
So then it talks about practicing, which I thought was kind of cool. So it gives you like a bit of a like homework almost. I didn't do the homework, mind you, but it has given me that. So it says, this week, as you navigate your important relationships, be mindful of how other people feel about you after the interaction is over and consider their perspective with kindness. Use wise mind to answer the questions about what's the most important thing in this interaction. And stay mindful of how your priorities change the interaction. So I thought that was like kind of a good, if you were, I mean, I should do this myself, but I didn't. If you needed it to like kind of have a task for yourself that week. On page 114, for some reason
Can I ask you to say, can I just say something really quick about that page? Just because, I mean, it occurs to me that like where it says, be mindful of how other people feel about you after each interaction. This seems like a trap for people with BPD, or at least particularly people like me. And I would, I mean, maybe like I would just offer the qualification of be mindful of how other people who treat me well and who do seem to have best intentions and interest of a real two-way relationship with me, like be mindful of how those sorts of people will feel after I interact, particularly. Not just like,
anyone.
Not just like people who are kind of like mistreating me, and seem to be enjoying it, because I think I worry way too much about that.
Yeah, I can totally see that digging me into a deeper hole of like, well, these people are treating me so badly, therefore I deserve to be treated, and I can't focus on any of these other than my relationship with them. But then my relationship with them, in order to like fix it or improve it, if that's the goal, it's like placating to their shitty treatment of me, which then makes me lose my self-respect. These skills are so fascinating. I love them to bits and they're so interesting, but man, do they get complicated when you like really put them all together, hey? Okay, so page 114. I, for some reason, skipped this the first time around. And then when I was reading the next page about the deer skill, I went back and went, oh, this is actually about the one before. It's a list of things that you do skillfully or things that you want to change. So it says, circle the unskillful strategies you want to stop using, and then circle the skillful strategies you want to increase. Did anybody do this exercise?
I thought it was about the next page too. So I was like, oh, there's chapters that I don't read.
Yeah, me too. At first, yeah. How about you, Dave?
I didn't circle it in that sense, but I found it helpful for two reasons. I find it helpful to have those reminders about like, and not everyone, like I'm not looking to flirt with anybody, but like,
I thought that was so funny. I literally put LOL next to that one.
Hey, look, they're not wrong, but there are a bunch here on that, like, it's a good reminder of like, if I'm going to deal with someone who's difficult or someone who's not being particularly nice, that like, just, it's like, where can I be kind, being honest, recognizing another person's needs, those sorts of things, they do help with all of these. And then I think getting back to just like the lack of ability to do the self-respect part or even think about it and believe that I deserve to have values or boundaries. It is nice, I can get caught in a black hole of this kind of stuff if I spend too much time on it, but it is nice sometimes to see lists of like, it is not okay to treat me in these ways. And, like it's hard for me to like notice that to sort of notice it out in the world. But looking at a list like this, and it's like, I don't deserve to be bullied or intimidated or given the silent treatment or treated passive aggressively or things like that. And it's okay for me to be hurt by that and upset by that and to not put up with it. Because that's something I still have to like actively remind myself.
Yeah, so it was like a tangible list of not just what you're doing, but what other people are doing to you that aren't skillful. That's interesting. I definitely wrote flirt LOL. I thought that was really funny. So I did do the exercise. A couple things that I wished were different about this exercise, to be honest. I wished that there was a few blank lines for things that you could add, or at least like space for you to add. So for example, the unskillful ways of getting what I want, I did circle a few of them, but I also wanted to add like being vengeful or doing things out of spite, which weren't on the list, but are certainly things that I want to stop doing. And they're definitely unskillful. And then maybe this is my like annoying positivity mind, but for the skillful strategies for getting what I want, circle the skillful strategies you want to increase. I liked that a lot, but what I really wished that they had was some sort of like code. I did it myself. I just put stars next to things, but stars where you can highlight like, hey, I'm really good at this. Like I do this super well. And it's not that I mean, obviously you can always increase things that you do super well, but I want to be able to acknowledge myself for how skillful I am in a lot of these ways. And so it's a super small change that I would have made, but I did anyway, here we are. And I just kind of did it myself. So I would encourage people, if you're doing page 114, that list, to highlight what you're doing really well. And you could do the same thing for the unskillful things, ways of doing what I want. For example, there's a lot of things on there that I used to do and I don't anymore. And that's something worth celebrating. I have a potentially annoying spin on some of I feel like we're treated like such bad people so often, and like the stigma is so large that I really want to, like, in everything I do. I mean, it's everybody's favorite part of super feelers is the successes, right? Hearing how people are doing well. But I just want to do that in every context, right? Like, yeah, we can all improve. And we're also badasses who are doing really well. And we are surviving the most painful mental illness. And good for us. Why wouldn't we celebrate that more? So just my take. Any other thoughts on the clarifying priorities skill? No? All right. Well, thank you so much to both of you for being here. I am really enjoying this series. Like, it's actually like really personally helpful because I'm learning the skills and hearing how other people are doing it. And I'm really hoping that it's going to be as helpful for the people that are listening. And I just love hanging out with you guys. I mean, I could do it all day, every day, really. If we lived closer, we didn't live in literally opposite places, sides of North America, I would hang out with you all day. So thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Super Feeler podcast. Today's episode was recorded on the unceded and traditional territory of the Matsqui and Sumas First Nations. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. Your feedback helps me reach more listeners like you, and we're always looking for improving the podcast. Remember, you can always stay connected with me on social media. You can follow us. The show notes will have all of the details for Instagram profiles. If you want to support the podcast and help me continue to bring great content, please consider joining the Super Feeler community on Patreon. Your support really means the world to me, and there's a variety of different options for support, including some free ones. For all information about the Super Feelers Club, which is the peer support that we run, including upcoming events and resources, head over to Eventbrite or laurieedmondson.com for more information. Until next time, keep on super feeling and living authentically. This is Laurie signing off of the Super Feeler podcast.